island in the West Indies. Discovered by Columbus, but already inhabited by the Caribs, it was fought over by the French and British and was for some time a centre for the slave trade. When the slaves were freed in 1833, Eugenia Charles' grandfather was among them. Now it's a laid-back, underdeveloped jewel in the wide Sargasso Sea, which has produced one of only 4 women prime ministers in the world.
After I became prime minister in 1980, the world seemed to make quite a thing of it that there was another woman prime minister in a small Caribbean island. And it hadn't struck Dominicans that there was anything peculiar about having a woman prime minister. I was the leader of the party had won. It was obvious that I was the prime minister. It was only the world reaction outside that made us stop to think, well, it is true, there are not so many of them in the world, and we have one of them. I think that Dominican women are strong, and maybe I shouldn't say it, but I think the pattern of family life makes for that, because there is a high rate of illegitimacy in Dominica. I mean, marriage is not the norm in Dominica. Many people do not get married, and yet have families. And there's nobody thinks anything of it, really. And I think as a result, women have learned to be father and mother and therefore run the household, and so they have had to be strong. I think women just don't want to be tied, like the foot around. And if a woman becomes too possessive, then they move away immediately and look for something else, somebody else. Many people thought that my father was the strong man of the family, but we who lived closer to them knew that my mother was in fact the boss of the family. She didn't always express it that way. She would probably say, your father requires you to do, but we knew very well that it was her own idea and that she was getting her way in the way she wanted it. Achievement seems to have been the thing always. What are you going to do with your life? How are you getting on? And, I remember at school, for instance, that I was in a class of 30 at one time, and I came out about 14th. My mother said, that's nonsense. You haven't done any work this year, And then the next year I came out 7th. He says, still is no use to us. And I moved into a small class of 7 people. And I came out 3rd. He said, that's still just halfway. I haven't done anything any better. So she wasn't satisfied until I came first in the class. And it wasn't that they pushed you, it was just that they expected you to do things.
Thanks to her parents, Eugenia Charles was able to study law both in Toronto and then in London. She was eager to see the world, but like many daughters, returned home to look after her aging mother and father. When she came back to the capital, Roseau, most other highly qualified Dominicans were leaving for good.
It was quite an event the night I returned home to Dominica. I was admitted to practice at the bar that very same night. And it was the first time that a Dominican woman lawyer being called to the bar. There was one other woman lawyer there, but she was a Trinidadian married to a male Dominican lawyer. And so I just went into practice and enjoyed it for 30 years. It was really good.
She's never married. Her father lived to 107. He died recently. She ran her law firm with no thought of politics. That was a new midlife career. She came in at 50, somewhat unwillingly.
In politics, women have taken great part, and they've always done a great deal. But they have not many of them, not in the same proportion, have they become active politicians. And yet it was not surprising when I became a politician. I don't think anybody stopped the gaze to think a woman was talking. I was not the first woman politician here. The other 2 were English, but there were other women politicians before me. And so I think that people accept that women should take part in politics, and that if more women don't take part, because they don't like the slander, the dirty fighting that goes with politics. I wasn't a member of any party. I thought, as a taxpayer, I had a right to talk. So anytime something was going wrong, I'd write a little nasty letter to the Chronicle, very short, to the newspaper, finding fault with something that was being done. And apparently those letters needled the people who were in authority. And so they decided to extend the Seditious and Undesirable Publications Act, amend it so that you really couldn't criticize government. It went so far that if you were overheard criticizing them in the privacy of a bedroom, you could be arrested for it. We called it the Shut Your Mouth Bill.
It was the Shut Your Mouth Bill that spurred Eugenia into forming her own Freedom Party, which now governs Dominica. She is, some say, autocratic. The opposition feels she acts too readily without consultation. She heads 3 ministries as well as being Prime Minister: Foreign Affairs, Finance and Economic Development. But she is certainly not corrupt. Even the opposition admits she doesn't have her fingers in the till. She looks back on her early days in politics, the 60s and 70s, as a murky period in Dominica's affairs. Partial Home Rule from Britain after 1967 left the country and the ruling Labour Party to its own vices. There were frequent attempts to clamp down on free speech. Power was in the hands of very few, with no adequate checks on government. And debate in the National Assembly, as Miss Charles, then opposition leader, recalls it, was often unconstructive.
The government party spent their time abusing me in the House, and it really only strengthened me, and I learned to completely ignore them. In fact, I learned not to hear what they said. I remember one particular one, because I got a good repartee, is why I remember it. They said, well, this woman, talking to me, can't possibly understand the suffering of children and women because she's never felt the pangs of childbirth. So at that point, I got up and said to the Speaker that, on a point of order, I thought that all these men in the front row belonged in the zoo because they had also felt, they apparently had felt the pangs of childbirth. So they were peculiar animals who belonged in the zoo. And there were other things like that they would abuse you about. And it brought me out of sympathy because the women didn't like to hear another woman being abused. And even some of their own supporters felt, why are they going on that tack? Why don't they get down to issues instead of trying to abuse a woman because she was in politics? I've never ever felt that, you know, if you were a man you could have done this, but you can't. Except perhaps a lot of politicking is done in the rum shops, and I'm not good in the rum shops.
In 1978, Dominica was granted full independence from Britain, although it remained a Commonwealth country. Eugenia Charles was opposed to independence. She felt Dominica wasn't ready for it, but the formalities went ahead. Princess Margaret flew in from Mustique to represent the Queen. But behind the scenes, Patrick John, then Prime Minister, was plotting his own future along with various business friends. He planned to turn a large part of the island into a free port with an oil refinery, a front for laundering goods for South Africa. John's closest associate in the deal was Don Pearson. Eugenia Charles minced no words in her condemnation of him.
The man's a phony. I mean, anybody can see it the first time you meet him. I certainly detected it, and I would have thought that the others in government should have done the same.
Stories of corruption in Dominica attracted the attention of the world's press. Eugenia Charles bode her time in the wings, and Prime Minister John continued to prevaricate.
My telegram, I told you that it was inopportune to meet me this time. It's very difficult now to talk about the future.
Yes. And we also hope to give you the opportunity of answering your critics.
Even after Eugenia Charles' election victory a year later, Patrick John planned to overthrow her.
People began getting more and more annoyed about it. And as a result, the populace revolted. Not only the political parties, not only the trade unions, but the people of the country voted and asked that he leave office. And in the end, he had to leave. I really feel that Patrick John had thought that he was the first Prime Minister and he should be Prime Minister forever. He continued to plot against the state with the weirdest group of people from North America, both Canada and the States. Ku Klux Klan, Nazis, and all sorts of funny people. All of them had one thing in common. They don't like black people. And yet he was plotting with them for them to take over this country, make us into a little drug haven, legalize marijuana, put up a coke factory here, etc., etc. He went through the courts and several appeals, but the courts found that he was wrong and they've imprisoned him on a 12-year sentence.
Patrick John is still in jail just outside Roseau. His proximity must be of concern to Eugenia Charles. One thwarted coup involved an attempt to release him from jail. Living alone, guarded only by a couple of military policemen, does she worry about her safety?
You keep your eyes and ears open, because if people can't get in by the ballot box, they will try to get in by the vote. But I don't live in constant fear it's going to happen. I don't go to bed always thinking that I'm going to wake up dead the next morning.
She did take the precaution of disarming the unreliable National Defence Force. A pretext was reports of soldiers trading guns for marijuana. There is no military presence now, only her trusted policemen.
I first took away the guns and there was a lot of criticism. And the British military advisor come down and tell me, you can't have an army without arms. And I said, I have a country without money, so why not an army without arms?
There was another force that helped bring Eugenia Charles to power in the throes of the Patrick John affair. Hurricane David struck Dominica in August 1979. It devastated the banana crop, killed 42 people, and left 3/4 of the population homeless. The interim government, which had replaced John, was helpless. Dominicans now sought a strong leader.
When we came in 1980, it was not an easy task to face this, because Hurricane David had taken place just 12 months before, and the devastation had been great. And people were still living in tents. Very little had been done in that year. I suppose we spent the time politicking and electioneering rather than trying to build the country back. And so there was a lot to do when we came in. And then economically, Dominica was on its last legs. I mean, there was no money in the treasury, we were in debt, had not been paying our installments of debt, and if you don't do that, you can't get any more money to borrow. But we were able, because we were independent, to go into the IMF, and we were able to go into program with them.
Foreign aid became the cornerstone of Prime Minister Charles' economic policies. She has no qualms about pricking the colonial conscience of France and Britain. She welcomed with the open arms of a political acolyte the deal the Americans were offering. All three countries flexed their military muscles for the celebrations of the 10th anniversary of independence.
Right now we're at anchor, however, in the morning we'll be going pierside, and then the British ship, the HMS Active, will moor outboard of us. The French minesweeper will be moored just to the north of us, and from that point on...
Are you going to be walk across the ships?
Yes, you'll be walking across King to get to the British ship. So all of the ships, I believe, will be dressing ship with all of our flags on both Wednesday the 3rd and on Thursday the 4th.
This would be a bad time for anybody to try a revolution, would it?
Yes, ma'am.
But revolutions do happen in the Caribbean, and the United States tends to take them very seriously indeed. In 1983, Maurice Bishop, the Prime Minister of neighbouring Grenada, was killed by radicals within his own party during a left-wing coup d'etat.
The Grenada issue was a simple one. For years we had seen what was happening in Grenada, and all of these islands were scared that it was only a matter of time before the same thing would happen to them.
Eugenia Charles, chair of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, invited the U.S. to invade.
We have taken this decisive action for 3 reasons. First, and overriding importance, to protect innocent lives, including up to 1,000 Americans whose personal safety is, of course, my paramount concern. Second, to forestall further chaos. And third, to assist in the restoration of conditions of law and order and of governmental institutions to the island of Grenada, where a brutal group of leftist thugs violently seized power, killing the Prime Minister, 3 cabinet members, 2 labor leaders, and other civilians, including children.
This is a question about asking for support. We are one region. Grenada is part and parcel of us, an organization, and we don't have the capacity ourselves to see to it that Grenadians get the freedom that they require to have to choose their own government.
The fighting was over in 2 or 3 days. The diplomatic storm went on long after. The Americans were accused of aggression in their first combat attack since the withdrawal from Vietnam. Comparisons were made immediately with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Recrimination followed recrimination. As things went back to normal on the streets of Grenada, the governor was criticised. Grenada is a Commonwealth country. He should, it was argued, have consulted the Queen. Eugenia Charles claimed it was the governor who'd begged for help from her and the Americans.
Well, I wouldn't, perhaps if I was invited to the invasion, what he did do was ask us for assistance. You know, he said, oh, you must do something. Something must be done by you all because the situation cannot be allowed to continue. I don't know that he was even thinking of our coming in as a rescue mission. I don't know what he had in mind at the time, but he just was desperate that something had to be done, and it couldn't be left as it was.
Dennis Healey doubted the governor was involved at all. He called Charles a liar. Britain smarted at the snub to the Reagan-Thatcher special relationship, and a House of Commons investigation found Sir Geoffrey Howe's approach somewhat lethargic. Eugenia Charles still defends her action.
In Britain at that time, amazingly enough, your Prime Minister was away from the country, and so was Sir Geoffrey Howe. They were in Portugal and Spain, I don't know which was where, but in Portugal and Spain. Not easy to get in touch with at the time. And so we went to the Americans for help. But we went to them before I went to America. It was because on the Sunday morning, the Beirut massacre took place. And on the Sunday afternoon, the top official of the Army of Cuba landed in Grenada. And that was what sent me off the next day to America, to ask them to hurry up. If they were going to help us, it was necessary to do it quickly.
The Grenada affair gave Eugenia Charles a profile in world affairs out of proportion with Dominica's size or strategic importance. She had, though, fulfilled her election pledge to be a Liberal Democrat and anti-communist.
If the same circumstances arose again or arose here in that way, I would welcome American protection. I would have to, because what we found when we were doing the Grenada thing is that we didn't have the manpower ourselves to do it.
In Roseau today, cabinet meetings vary from elevated questions of international security to the basics of rubbish collection, always preceded by a prayer.
With everlasting prosperity and peace, as is your Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever.
I thought without an agenda this week that it would be a good chance to talk about some of the other things that we've been putting off. But perhaps the most important one is the garbage disposal. We can't go on doing as we want. You remember I said last time I thought we should go back to donkey and cart days because it was much cleaner. And so we're thinking of this method where you have skips, as they call these things. You've seen them in larger cities. When there's a construction site, they have a huge skip, they're putting all the rubble in. And the skips could be made here. We'd order the first few, but they actually could be welded here, which would be a good thing. I think the basis of garbage collection, in fact, is that the people themselves do their own work. That they no longer just drop it on the ground and a person comes and picks it up for them. That they put it right there into the container until the container goes away. That alone means a cleaner town. So that people do most of the work themselves.
Eugenia Charles' first task was to clear up after the hurricane. Her mission all along has been to pick Dominica up by its bootstraps, cleaning up corruption and building roads. She takes a maternal view of Dominicans, but won't pamper them. Her priorities are not in welfare, but in self-help. She feels the people of Dominica lend themselves naturally to small enterprise. Small businesses are certainly the norm, and trading is a livelihood for many, carrying goods by small boat to and from Guadeloupe, Martinique, St. Lucia, and St. Kitts. Eugenia Charles sees the hucksters as a symbol of this private enterprise. They're women who buy surplus fruit and vegetables and ship them to the more developed islands, returning with electrical and plastic goods. They're the Tupperware ladies of the Caribbean. But they're often trading out of necessity rather than some indigenous mercantile spirit. There's no dole money in Dominica. Bananas, though, are the mainstay of the Dominican economy. They're grown not on plantations, but on small holdings. Private ownership, like trade, is what the Prime Minister believes every Dominican wants.
The Dominicans have the history of wanting to own their own land. And I don't know where it comes from, where the pattern comes from, but it's something that's very strong in all Dominicans, that they should be able to have a title, what they say in patois, un petit papier, for their land. And I think that's a very good and very healthy sign too. And they want to be able to leave it for the child that they want to leave it for whom they want to leave it. They don't want it tied in any other way. You know, they really want to be able to be free to do with the land what they want. And I think that's a very good thing. The Dominican farmer is growing accustomed to the banana. He knows how to work with it. He likes working with it. And he has seen it as a means of livelihood to it. And he's done pretty well out of it in the last year or two. And so that's why I say it's a mainstay and it's so important and nothing else can replace it.
The bananas make up nearly half of the island's exports. Dependence on any one crop is a dangerous practice, and Miss Charles admits they should diversify. But the banana is too tempting. It's always been seen in the West Indies as the cash crop to counter communism, a steady income direct into the farmer's pocket. The Prime Minister is loath, though, to meddle with the economy.
We're also free market, free enterprise, and we encourage people to do things for themselves. When we came in, we found that the past government wanted to be the be-end and end-all of everything, and everything had to start from government. Because I don't think that government should completely take over on people. I think government is there to encourage people to be responsible, do their own things, and to put the measures in place which will help them to do this. And this is what we've been doing.
How are you? I know you are here. Are you all right? Yeah. Happy holiday. Thank you. And you too. Okay, fine.
Once a week, the banana boat comes in. It's owned or chartered by Geest and sails its cargo to Barry in South Wales. A radio announcement tells farmers the docking time, and the rush begins to cut the bananas, box and drive them to the company's coastal depots. Geest have a virtual monopoly in Dominica. In Britain, their Windward Island fruit has first priority in the market, an arrangement known as the Banana Protocol. But many Dominicans feel Geest have had it too good for too long. They don't pay enough, it's said, for the bananas or for shift work. Workers are taken on only 1 or 2 days a week. Eugenia Charles, though, is grateful for an assured buyer.
I think that it's always good to produce, but unless you have a person prepared to buy it, you're producing for nothing. So Greece is the one who, not introduced, but certainly took on and made the banana take off in Dominica. So we're very glad that they did that. We have a contract with them every 2 years, I think it's negotiated. And we negotiate very hard and very bitterly to get every cent we can out of Greece. But we realize that they also have to make a profit or they wouldn't bother buy our bananas.
There are signs the Dominican banana grower may be thrown out into the real world before long. It may not always be possible to have preferential treatment.
We're very grateful for the fact that Britain has, for the past few years, supported our bananas and allowed us preference into the British market. Now with a common market coming in, an open market, a free market for Europe in 1992, on the surface, it shouldn't affect us. The bananas we ship into Britain, we just ship more into Europe. But that isn't so because Holland and Denmark and West Germany have always been buying from the Latin American countries. And they can produce bananas at a much cheaper rate.
There was such alarm in the islands at the prospect of the European single market that a conference was called to discuss its possible consequences. Eugenia Charles travelled to London to defend Dominica and the protected banana trade. To an audience of Eurocrats, she appealed again to the idea of the banana as a stabilising anti-communist force.
We have been telling our farmers at home the truth, but perhaps not the whole truth, that in fact they need not fear 1992 if they produce excellent bananas from now, that they will be able to find a market. What we have not added is that this depends on Europe doing the right thing by us, because both of these are required. We want good bananas, excellent bananas to export, but we also want, and let us not pretend, we want a preferential market. I know that when you talk of free trade, you can't talk of protection. I understand that. But you have to find a phrase that will cover what we require, and that is we must have protection in the market for bananas. You know, I like to say, and it is already mentioned here, what would happen if we lost the banana industry in the windwards. And I like to say to all of you here that the world would have to pay a lot much more for a peacekeeping force than they would for paying a little bit more for our good bananas on the European market.
Prime Minister, thank you very much. It's clear you struck a chord. Now, anybody else want to speak on the banana issue?
Europe made no promises, but Eugenia Charles was here to lobby, and lobby she did, trading on her reputation as a senior Caribbean head of government.
Well, I'm glad to hear of this. I'll follow this up.
Yeah, and even though we won't get the money immediately, we've got to take time. At least the university could borrow money. You know, but it's important that the EEC must agree to refund this time, because you don't usually refund. You don't usually let us spend and then give us back the money.
From straight-talking the European Commission to tea and British politics, a curiosity about Labour's black sections, and a word of advice.
And I think the name, there's a problem with the name. You know, black sections,
minority sections, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, that's right. I think that one of the things that they've agreed is that they will change the name.
A visit to London would be incomplete without a courtesy call to the other Iron Lady.
Hello, welcome. Please come. Now, shall we do our customary? How are you feeling? I have to catch you. Good, you all got a good picture? Those both? All right.
They talked business, in particular British aid for developing a new airstrip in Dominica. On the surface, the two women would seem alike in more ways than their iron resolve. Prime Minister Charles points to the differences and to the similarities.
My great admiration with Mrs. Thatcher is this, that you may not always like the policy she's carrying out, but there's no doubt at all that she sincerely believes in them. She's not being a hypocrite about them. She sees no other way of doing it, and she sincerely believes in what she's doing. And that, I think, we share.
And they certainly share one aim, to go on and on.
The celebration of the 10th anniversary of our independence provides a fitting occasion for national stock-taking. Friends, I have given much thought, deep thought, to my continued involvement in the politics of this our beloved country. I have decided to lead my party into the next general elections and to go on for one further full term. There is much left to be done. I am energized by your support. I am fortified. I am fortified by your recognition and appreciation of our steadfast leadership. I am sustained by your patience. I will not abandon. I will not give up. I will not give up until our international airport is under construction. Until all our major feeder roads have been constructed, until our rural electrification program has been completed, until pipe-borne water is available in all villages of this country.
Building an international airport is the Prime Minister's most ambitious project. The island is mountainous and rugged, and there is no obvious site for it. Fast-flowing rivers cut through even the flatter stretches of land, and an airstrip of international size would be immensely costly, not only in terms of finance, but to the island's delicately balanced ecology. But she feels there's no hope of attracting business or tourism without it. Aid, she sees, is the answer.
It requires so much capital to put the infrastructure in to really set us on our feet so that we can develop better economically. But I'm quite sure that if I can get an airport that can take larger planes than we take now, and it can be lit, so we can use it over more than 6 hours a day. And so we could develop tourism. It would bring a lot of jobs, and I think it would help us economically. If we can get all the feeder roads in for the person in the country, get the water system established, get a tourist jetty established for cruise ships, that we would have good figures in employment and everybody earning. And we wouldn't be a rich country, but we'd be able to stand on our own feet. And that's what my goal is.
There are serious worries among the opposition about Miss Charles' high-tech aid-fed projects. They feel the island is threatened, that development for tourism would destroy the lives of its people. It is, for most of the population, a simple life. Nobody goes hungry, and there are no casinos or hard drugs to corrupt the young. But most believe it's only a matter of time before Dominica goes the way of other Caribbean islands, a tropical paradise for the rich. For the moment, local colour is, for the most part, for themselves. And on a national holiday, the Prime Minister herself is resplendent in the most traditional form of the national costume. The checked madras fabrics, layered petticoats, silken shawl and cap tell the story of colonial rule. The tastes of the slave women combine with the fashion of the 18th century French. Dominica's own Jingping music survives. It's softer than salsa or reggae, with touches of the French accordion and the African drum. Public appearances on such social occasions are for the Prime Minister more a duty than a pleasure.
I'm not a crowd person. Of course, politics takes you into a larger number of people. But I'm a loner person. I'm a person that likes to do things on my own and be on my own.
And contestant number 7, Joan George.
A lot of people have asked me why it is I've never married. I mean, I didn't make any deliberate intention not to marry. But I think the way I've lived, the things I've been doing, have kept me from having any close, long relationships with anybody that would end up in marriage. And really, it would be kind of hard on a man to be married to me because he probably called Eugenia Charles his husband all the time. And nobody likes that. My brother gets annoyed because when he's called Eugenia Charles his brother, he says, no, Eugenia Charles is my sister. And I think that I think I've been able to do a better job, quite frankly, because I'm single, I'm free, I'm able to do things, I'm able to spend all the time I want on matters of state. And I think that has helped a great deal.
The body and the blood of Christ.
Eugenia Charles is a religious woman, a practicing Catholic, committed to clean living.
The body and the blood of Christ.
At 70, she shows every sign of continuing the Charles family tradition of longevity. She's carved a place for herself in the Caribbean, filling a vacuum left by leaders like Tom Adams, Edward Seaga, and Maurice Bishop. To her electors, she's a stern, grandmotherly figure, hated and feared by some, but still one of few prime ministers who dares walk freely among the people, friend or foe.
I feel like one of the people. I don't feel apart from them. And I get a lot of strength from them and from the support and from the fact that you can listen to what they want, and not always can you give them what they want, but you can sometimes give them what they need. And I think I get strength from that.
How are you? I don't know if they have
The BBC wishes to thank the United States Department of Defense for the use of archive material of Grenada.